relatable, because in that arc that we all go through, you know, that hero's journey where we're in the darkness and we all experience uncertainty and fear and anger. After my show, that was the first time people started coming up to me and saying, you know, I didn't go through anything like that, but I could really understand a time in my life that I was going through fear and uncertainty, and that was the first time I felt part of the world again. And I really don't think I started healing until I did this show and I had the experience of people relating what they had been through to what I had been through. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is, even if it takes a long time, and take your time, it is so important to figure out what we're feeling to a point where we can start talking about it, or even if we're not ready to talk about it, start expressing it. Because when we can feel that empathy from someone who not necessarily has been through exactly what you've been through, but we all go through these detours, it's really amazing the healing that starts happening back in community. So my last, let me see what time it is. Oh, the last skill, hardcore skill of resilience, I call them, is gratitude. And I'm saving this for after this because, you know, sometimes when you go through a really hard time and you're like, my detour is over. And, but I realize detours never really end because that's the nature of life. So a week after this, actually appropriately timed for election day, I had my first elective surgery. And that's because, you know, from the surgeries that I had so far, which was 24, I believe, things weren't healing properly. And there was an option, you know, I have an ostomy bag and I had a wound that wasn't closed. So a week after I premiered this show, which was all about how I've conquered the odds and, you know, all that, I had this elective surgery, which was not so wonderful. It turned into 3 emergency surgeries in 8 days, and it made things even worse. So you have to imagine waking up in the hospital. Once again, I was told I couldn't eat or drink. This was 27 surgeries later, when I'm like telling nurses, like, wait, no, you don't get it. I was just singing and dancing about all this. Like, I shouldn't be back here. And they're all like, okay, lady, So I was really about to give up hope. This is when I discovered gratitude. And I even have a picture of, oh, that's not the right picture. There it is. So because I always need something to do, especially when I was trying to get my mind off of not eating and drinking again, I started making lists from A to Z. And I made myself write one thing I was grateful for every letter. And honestly, this was not to make myself grateful. This was really, I needed something to do because I was losing it. So I did that. You know, I was there for months. For every day I was there for those months. And as I was making those lists, I realized that those things I was grateful for, you know, T for like tree outside my window, M for, you know, mom staying with me today, you know, those gratitude items, they were coming from a larger place. They were coming from my values, like trees, oh yeah, nature is important to me. Mom, right, you know, family is a big value. And I realized when you know what you're grateful for, you know what you stand for, you know what you're about. And this reminded me, you know, it's very easy in a hospital to feel kind of, you know, stripped of your identity and that you're just kind of a patient, which was very crazy making considering I felt like I had just become an actress the month before. So having this larger foundation of what my values were, that was enough to just remind me, you know what? I am so much bigger than these circumstances right now. And that was enough to help me through. And that's why, I always say, if you're looking for the quickest thing to just start with when you're faced with a detour, make the list A to Z and do it quicker than you can think about. Just write really quickly for each letter of the alphabet one thing you're grateful for. Because it's more than to just get you to be thankful that you're here right now. It's really to remind you, you know what, there is something that I built here my whole life that is much larger than this one thing that happened. And that was enough to get me through. So all those four things together, that's an active dance with all four of those things, but I really use those as tools over and over again. After this, I ended up starting college at 25. I went to Hampshire. I graduated at 30. I'm in grad school now. But I ended up realizing when I was with college students too, who were facing like the day-to-day stresses of college, and I was facing those too, for like exams and things like that. There was a part of me that was like, it kind of feels good being anxious about the little things, but it also felt like, this equally, uncertain time, I can use these for this just as I could use it for my divorce that came after and my car accident, and then the little things like a book that went in a different way I didn't expect. So these skills, these are really active resources that I continue to use. So the power of gratitude. And then basically it inspired me, I went back to that one-woman musical, Gutless and Grateful, especially being on a college campus. I realized how therapeutic it was to start sharing my story. And I ended up, working with students on how they can find some way that feels comfortable for them to at least start realizing they have a story worth sharing, telling it for themselves, and then figuring out, how can we reach out with our story, and watch the healing that happens through it. So yeah, I do want to say one more thing about this like bad energy that I faced a lot of, and we all face. We all get anxious, we all get sad. Grief is a very difficult feeling to deal with. I experienced that a lot. My grandparents, who I was very close to, they passed away when I was just getting out of the hospital, and last time I saw them was before I got sick. So this was my first experience of grief out of the hospital that I had to find a healthy way to deal with. I learned that, the more you run from those things, the more they'll get at you in different ways. And so, again, the creativity was a great way to take any of that energy and find different ways to deal with it. Really quick, not really quick, but does anyone have any questions of anything so far? I'm sure you do, but anything? Hello, yes.
I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm one of the professors here.
Oh, thank you.
And my question, you're incredible and or inspiring.
Well, thank you.
My question is that we have been seeing a lot in TV, movies, Hollywood stories about the sexual abuse right now. Do you think we're heading for a little more acceptance and awareness, or we have lots of roadblocks about survivors talking to us?
Right. No, I'm glad you brought that up, and it's interesting because, especially since the Me Too movement and then everything that's happened since, I've been asked more about that. And first of all, it shows how times have changed. When I originally premiered Gutless and Grateful in 2012. It's interesting how I was so comfortable talking about my medical trauma and my stomach exploded, but I was very scared, and I didn't even know if I should bring in the sexual abuse in it because it still felt like something you shouldn't talk about. And so I remember I had one line in my New York premiere about how I was sexually abused right before. And I remember, all the reviews came out and they were great. And then there's always one line that you can't forget where some cabaret reviewer said, she makes it a little bit of a stretch when she brings up the sexual abuse and says, that caused like a lot of emotional pain that, maybe caused physical pain. And I remember thinking like, maybe I shouldn't have brought that up at all. But I ended up making that a bigger thing in my show. as more people started coming up to me after and start telling me about it. And then I realized that, it just takes one person to get the conversation started, and I think that's, what's happening. And I don't know if you have a Take Back the Night event on your college campus, but it's something for Sexual Assault Awareness Month where a lot of survivors come forth and tell their story. And it's very interesting sometimes where it's very hard to get people going and talking about it, and then once someone starts talking about it, a lot of people do. So I think now that it's brought up, it's good that people are talking about it. What I get scared of is I kind of feel thankful that I was isolated, because I think it took me a lot of time to work out for myself what had happened, and I didn't have the words yet. If I just come out on stage, I would have just been this, I don't know what I would have started talking about. I needed years of like art and dance and punching a pillow and things like that to really work through what had happened. So I worry that people talking about it might turn into, for survivors, a pressure that they should say something, and something's wrong if they don't say something, and they might be talking before they feel ready to. So I just, I think it's good, but I also hope just as much focus is being set up on making sure survivors get the, individual and internal support they need before, things are brought up, in the public. Because I know right now there's so much on the media now that it can be very triggering. There is, a threat of re-victimization for people that haven't figured out healthy ways to deal with triggers and stuff. So talking about it is just one half of something, and then at the same time, the support, needs to be in place. So I hope that answered your question. Anyone else? Yeah. Oh, hello. Hi, what you do? Hello.
How did you finish reading the rest of the book on how to overcome your sexual abuse?
I'm sorry, did I finish reading the Courage to Heal book?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's a workbook, and so it had a lot of, when I started it, and it's interesting at the time that I felt so ashamed when I bought it, I put it in a journal cover, because I did, again, this was 2007, but I still felt weird. A lot of them were written prompts, and I couldn't do them. I tried, but I didn't have the words to figure it out. I had to go back to certain things to fill it out. And there is no, with any mental health issue, there is no one way to heal from anything. For me, it took a lot of different, I needed movement, I needed dance, I needed art, I needed different ways. But I think those books are great too, even if they just get the ball rolling. And then you can always go back to them, at different times. But it's definitely not, I never thought of it as a failure for not finishing a healing book, or, all those are meant to just plant seeds and work in, whatever way they need to for us. So, yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever talk to God during this experience?
Oh yeah, yes, that's a really good question. Yes. And at the beginning of the book, because I do make a lot of references to God in my book, but I also talk about how when I say God and spirituality, when whoever reads this book, it's whatever energy we feel connected to, whether it's up there or in here or just around us, that makes us feel like we're part of something larger. For me, my foundation, Judaism was always a big part of my life, because family was important to me. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and my grandmother was, survived Auschwitz at 18. So I really felt, going through this at 18, I felt, connected to her, and I looked to her for guidance. And then when I had come out of the hospital and found out that she had passed away, I needed some way to hold on to her. And so she became kind of like my angel guide that I could, really be with. And in circumstances that I felt so isolated that I felt like, who is going to help me? I ended up like talking, with my mom. I would say, well, I'm talking to grandma, or like I'm talking to God. And it really felt like it was moving me forward. But I always say, it's whatever energy that we find that really moves us forward. I found it in trees. I found it. One thing I liked about being raised Jewish is I was brought up with this philosophy that there's like hidden life all around us, and like everything is sacred. And that was just a cool energy to kind of live with. Like if I'm walking on the ground, like, and I'm seeing things in the air, this is all part of life. And I think when I felt like no one could hear me and just very shut out from the world, even just looking out my window just always reminded me that, there's something, whatever it is, something's like guiding me. I think it's nice to feel guided, so, yeah. Hello.
I was wondering, did you ever get a chance to confront this person or get an apology, or, did anything happen from that?
Good question. So no. No, and it's interesting because as soon as I was out of the coma, or out of the hospital, obviously, my parents took me to a lawyer to see, and you have to understand too, this was a very different time. It's amazing how things have changed. I feel like I'm like 80. This was like 2009, but it's still. I'm not 80, I'm 32. So we went to see a lawyer, and the lawyer looked at me, and you have to imagine how I looked just getting out of the hospital, like on IVs. He said, you just recovered from a coma. If you testified in court, they are going to like eat you alive. It will be such a grueling process that you just need to focus on your health and getting better. And at that time, for me and for the circumstances, he was right. At that time too, New York, like 17 was an age of, consent, which obviously makes no sense if the person is in a position of authority. And so there was a long time, which I went through and I have a book of some of my art there that you can see. And in my theater and in my songs that I wrote, there was a lot of anger that I was trying to, get out. And I have my book incorporates passages from my three brothers who stayed in the hospital with me. And there was one time where I woke up and I really wanted a confrontation. And I think I was lucky that I was unable to actually go forth on a confrontation because of my circumstances. Because I think every survivor wants a confrontation, and then you have to get to the point where you need to think about what am I looking for out of this? Because the truth is most survivors don't get, what they're hoping for. I realize the best kind of confrontation would be getting my life back, and I really felt that when I was on stage doing my show, especially because this man was my voice teacher. I really felt like, I got my health back, I got my voice back, I'm on stage, and that's my victory. Again, because it's a different time now, who knows, but I definitely did want a confrontation for a long time. But I think taking care of yourself is much more important. So, yes. Yes.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. But
No.
I think you're an amazing person.
Thank you.
But I'm just struck at how much I can see now how mental health really affects your physical health.
Yes.
In both ways, negatively and positively,
Mm-hmm.
when you're coming back from something. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. And I want to say something about that. The cool part about, first of all, I feel so lucky that I started college at 25 because I had a lot of time to figure out once I got into college, my plan of attack, what I wanted to study. So while you're here, take advantage, because college, you can learn everything. never taken a science course in my life. I ended up taking the science of stress course, I think just because it fit into my schedule. And I had to write a dissertation, and I was never in like a lab kind of class before, but I ended up doing on the science of stress. And that was really the first time that I learned about PTSD, and I ended up, my professor nudged me to look at all these studies, linking, physical and mental health, issues, and then I realized, you know what, like, the body and mind, are really related, and this has been shown, we hold that energy, in chronic illness and in back pain, and it just shows that that's why creativity is like such an important skill for anyone, because if we don't get that out in some way, it's like trying to get a hole under like a rug. If you step on it, it's going to come up somewhere else, and that will come up in, numbing out through some way, or chronic pain, or chronic illness. It's amazing how I've experienced that, and it happens. So there's no way to run from those things. So you got to find some way to talk about it or experience it. I want to do something really quick. Oh wait, okay. Don't kick me out. There's so much stuff. Trauma can be really fascinating, but just really quick. And I have like books you guys can read. Not my book, but other books. My book too. But Peter Levine is a great book, Waking the Tiger, where he talks about, instead of looking at energy as, scary, or I feel fear, I feel anger, starting with, if we just start with this awareness without judgment, like physical sensations, like, oh, what does anxiety feel like? Oh, just this hotness in my chest. Or if we just start with that blank kind of open mind, then it encourages us to really explore that emotion and transform it into something else. So if I had time, I would be like, oh, name an emotion, and like, what does it feel like? Frozen, dense, and this is actually a list from his book. But then you can take that physical energy and you can figure out what's something creative I can do with that. And at the time that I made Singing Tree, I was feeling like every, knotted, clenched, constricted, what can I do with that paintbrush, and how can I transform it into something else? And I brought some of my art. I don't have any art training. What I love about art is you can just be physical. As you see, I'm a physical person. And I can throw stuff on, there's literally toilet paper and plastic wrap and things on the floor, and it's all for sale. And move it around. And the great thing about making art is you make a mess, and then you're forced to just keep moving it around until it turns into something different. And that's literally what you can do with any of this stuff. All right, now I really have to wind down. Oh, there was more, but that's all you get for today. Superhero fight. Okay, I'll leave you with this. Really, my superheroes, my warriors army. You hear about be here now to the point where it doesn't mean anything anymore. These 5 things made me feel like I was never alone, and they made me okay with whatever my circumstances were. So like, if I just, however bad things were, if I could just put myself here and think, okay, what's something very quickly, all 5, in the moment, wherever you are right now, objectively, nothing is really bad, like right here, right now, especially if that anxious energy or negative energy you feel, if you're able to just feel those as like physical sensations, then really we're just like here. And the truth is, life is too short. Either way, whatever happens, to not at least take whatever moment you have and find one thing that's here. There was so much more, but that's all I'm gonna do. But I'll be here if you have anything that you want to talk about. I'm also selling my book at a student discount, and cards and art. And I talk too, so I'll talk to you. But and any questions come up to me, I just want to be mindful of the time, because I'm sure you guys have stuff in college. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you.